Three, two, one. Yeah, that worked. That definitely synced the audio.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really no syncing that I have to do because it's recording both tracks at the same time.
That's so sick. That's so epic.
But I think we did a great job there of sounding like the Nintendo Switch. So,
Dude, I love just playing my one video game. It's so exciting. Because through Sifu, I would just play like 20 minutes of Mario Kart. I'd be like, wow, this is such a cool game. And then I'd put my Switch 2 in the corner where it belongs until Donkey Kong comes out. And then I'm like, you've been a bad boy for not releasing with more games. I'm going to go back to play a real man's game, Sifu. And then I would go play Sifu for 15 minutes, like die immediately, and then get pissed off, and then go back to playing Mario Kart. That was the experience.
we call that the Sifu loop, boys and girls.
That's what they mean by gameplay loop. It's just you play Sifu, get frustrated, play a different game.
You know, you hit 40 in Sifu and you have an IRL midlife crisis. And you're just like, gotta go back to...
For context, it got really bad because Matt had to specifically tell me to try to beat the first level because I was trying to perfect it on my first try with like no skills. So I kept doing it, and it was like me running straight into a wall for like 2 or 3 hours. And I did this 3 days in a row after we only were supposed to have like a week left to actually play the game, and then we delayed it another month. And then I was like, all right, I'll look at the instruction tutorial. I'll do it. You got me. Game is hard. Oops.
So now, mind you, I've got a few heart conditions, and I'm someone who gets worked up very easily. I don't rage at games, right? I play League of Legends, not anymore, but I used to. It was a dark time. I got so angry playing this game, I gave myself chest pains and had to keep stopping. I did not finish Sifu. I tried so hard, but I was getting so mad. I was actually actively concerned for my health.
I remember you like were in one of the chats and like you were like, hey guys, kind of angry right now.
Yeah.
Go in grandpa mode.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally forgot it. I actually had behind the scenes, I had a cardiac episode. It was after I had decided to stop playing. But I think it was the same day or something. I had an actual cardiac episode. I'm like, I'm grandpa mode. You can't get Gampy too excited, otherwise he needs to lay down for a little while. So yeah, I had to go Gampy mode from this game because I had a cardiac episode.
Man. Maybe we need... Maybe this is like a bit of a therapy session. This is the AA meeting of freaking... Hi, my name is Nick.
It was
Sifu
rough.
psychologically traumatized me.
Because the thing is, I feel like the game goes through these cycles of teaching you something, and then it's like, oh, by the way, remember that later. We're gonna need that later, but not right now. Right now, you're getting your ass beat by like 4 or 5 people at the same time. Yeah. And because you're getting your ass beat, you actually broke your meter, and now they're gonna all combo you. The whole gang's here. My grandma's here. She'll beat your ass with a wooden cane, and that was the experience of playing Sifu.
I think there's a bit of a paradox, right? In the sense of, to build off what you were saying, with feeling like you were tunnel visioning on levels of like, I have to be really good at this. But I think there's merit to that, right? Because the game almost asks you of that. So to talk about one of the main mechanics, like you die, and it's not that you have to restart the level like in a traditional game setup. Instead, your character ages. And I believe it's 73 is when you actually like age out and have to basically restart the level if you haven't completed it. But that's the shtick for Sifu in a nutshell. So basically, it's not enough to just complete a level. You have to complete the level and be really good at it. There is definitely a lot of like as you progress, there are various shortcuts that you're going to unlock. Maybe you get an item, a key or something to unlock a door that you haven't already. But as we'll probably get to, there is one level that is very notorious for making you basically do the whole thing, or at least like at 2/3 of it, even after you have unlocked all the shortcuts. So for me, that was my biggest barrier with the game. And I do appreciate that from a game design perspective, they put that early, because if you're not going to vibe with it and you're not going to get over that, at least it's not, you don't have that sunk cost fallacy of like, I already did, majority of this game. Let me just get it through, even though I'm not really enjoying myself. So I do appreciate that it's early, but that was my biggest blocker. I felt pretty
Yeah.
similar at that point to, things you guys were talking about in the chat. Just like, this is dumb, man. Like, what are we doing here? Like, that was my breaking point. But once I finally got through that, I feel like I was fine for the rest of the game. Like, I might have gotten a little frustrated in the level afterwards, but that was definitely peak frustration for me, was level 2.
Yeah, I think for me, I the thing that gets me is it's such a cool concept. I really do like the idea of when you die, you come back a little bit older and you lose health, but you like gain essentially attack damage. So you're, yeah, you're a little bit more fragile, but you have the experience to be more powerful. I thought that was a really cool mechanic. I had my qualms with how the skill tree works. I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But overall, like on paper, I loved so much about this game. The music, so I made it up to the second boss, and that's when I had to like lay down.
Yeah.
Um, the music is so good, and specifically, I loved the music in the club. It like really scratched my brain super good.
Yeah.
Visually, it's a beautiful game. It's really, really pretty. And there's like so much care and like such an original idea. It's super cool to have this like beat 'em up that has actual combos. Like feels like a fighting game, but plays, like a roguelike sort of. I loved that. But the thing for me was just the controls. At least I play on keyboard and mouse because I cannot play on a controller. The controls felt bad. Um, when I had initially been playing on medium, and I was not of skill level for that. I know myself, so I bought myself down to easy, and I don't know if it was just me or what the issue was, but I was having actual like input issues playing on easy. Felt controls felt a little bit muddier. Nothing really felt quite as snappy, and it could just be a bug with my game. But I was having some issues where after combos I would be stuck in a crouch, and I could not leave the crouch. I would have to actually flip the menu open to leave the crouch. So I was having just some controls issues and some general frustrations. But on paper, I loved the game. The frustration I couldn't get past.
Um, I guess like speaking about the difficulty in general, I tend to try to play my games on hard. I've been doing this just not to be gamer or just to be like better than you at a video game, but mostly because I think that like for me personally, playing on like normal or easy difficulties, I don't pay attention as much to the games, and I find that I have to like really learn something if I'm gonna play it on hard just to play it. So I tend to try to do that. And with Sifu, this was one of those games where I couldn't do. I
Yeah.
I I feel like I've had a tendency of being okay at like some of the harder games. I can play like Bloodborne and Dark Souls pretty regularly without issues, but I like loaded up. All right.
He
Yeah,
starts
my
pulling
internet's like
moves.
dying right now. Yeah. he starts pulling moves out. I get comboed to death, and I getting comboed to death. And I tried to be like, like thick skulled about it. I like practiced a bunch. I like went back into it. But since we were trying to do like the podcast every month and like do it that way. I was like, feasibly, if I commit myself to doing this, it's gonna take me a lot longer to actually like master and learn all of the moves and the movesets, just because everything is so fast that I don't think I would be able to finish this game in time like we're supposed to. So I also had to like basically take the difficulty and like move it back as well. Um, for controls, I did have like issues with inputs. I don't know, like
Yeah, you froze again.
necessarily.
Give it one more sec. Okay. While that source is way out,
There it
I'll.
goes.
Ooh, okay.
Um, so just like with the difficulty, like I was having a tough time just like getting around to like learning the controls and mastering things, and so
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go back and like learn everything, and even still like I think I was having like input issues as well. I would try to do like low sweeps and things, and maybe like the timing just wasn't as good or what the game wanted. And it like if like I was trying to introduce it to a combo or do something with it, it wouldn't input correctly, and then like I'd get smacked in the face and combo to death. And I felt like it was a pretty common occurrence, um with the way that the game wants to be played. Like you're doing a lot of keep away, since it's supposed to be kind of like realistic martial arts where like it's just one guy versus like 10 people essentially. So if you let yourself get overwhelmed, like they are just going to beat the ever living shit out of you. um and like it is styled after a lot of like Hong Kong cinema. Um, One of the things I noticed in particular was like Old Boy was definitely referenced, where like he fights in a hallway scene very similar to the first episode, like the first level. Um, but yeah, like there were many moments where I felt like just because I made like one input mistake, it like cost me a run like entirely. And that's what was like frustrating for me, was like it just felt extremely punishing at times, like where like I would die once and then it would just kind of like landslide into more and more deaths as like time went on.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Had to let Cat in. Ugh, okay. So two things that I wanted to mention was one in regards to difficulty. I feel like my take on difficulty is usually I do normal because even though I know it's nowhere near perfect, my general idea is that that's the intention of what the developer wants this experience to be. I do think that there's totally a lot of merit in terms of veering towards harder difficulty because there are many cases where it does force you to actually work for, the gameplay systems that have been employed. There's tons of games that have played it. I'm sure we could all say this, where you put it on normal and it's one of those kind of turn your brain off things. And I mean, there's systems there, but it's more just like, these are here if you want to. You could totally just use X thing and like it doesn't really matter. So that's that. And then in terms of controls specifically for Sifu, I would say the sweep and the palm strike, which are like the two main ones that they teach you at the start, those just felt like not really intuitive timing for me. Like once I got the hang of it, it was fine and I knew the groove, but it's not really what I expected in terms of what was needed for the button presses. And we could segue into talking a bit about moves because of that. Nick and I talked a little bit about this the other day when we were on Discord, but basically, I think the game does have a lot of cool moves and does make you feel like a kung fu artist, but it is a bit of a case of like it's very possible for you to get through the main story with really only needing like sweep, the kick that you have to do as more of like a get off me kind of move, and maybe a few more situational things here and there. But I feel like you really just need those two, and then the light and heavy attacks. I don't know what your guys' experience was with that, but
Yeah, I think for me personally, the basic move set was really what I more or less stuck to. I did like kind of tweaking what I had in terms of the armed combat. I very much enjoyed having the staff. I thought it was nice to be able to throw the bottle just to get a little bit of reach or like choose when and how I aggro. Um, so that felt very nice. I did enjoy how the armed combat felt in general. Um, but I did notice so the skill tree not the most intuitive. Again, that was very much something
Mhm.
where Matt and Nick. I think Matt, you were the one that had sent the video of like, okay, this is the tutorial. This is a different guy telling you how to play, but this is the tutorial to watch.
yeah,
Um, I yeah, and I very much like what I was doing changed immensely after that. Should not have had to go to a random dude on YouTube to learn how to play the game while playing the
yeah.
game. Um, but skill tree was not the most intuitive, but I did tweak kind of each time I restarted what I had. At the end of the day, though, I mean, what you kind of started out with as the basics were pretty okay. And I did specifically wind up having an issue, and I had to restart. This was thankfully when I had restarted when I dropped from medium to easy. Um, I had taken and permanently kept what is it? The light light heavy combo. That I
Mhm.
think, yeah, that for some reason was not procking properly for me. So as a result, that's just a combo that's very easy to accidentally go into because light
Yeah.
heavy that so every so often I would just like do that by accident, and there would be some sort of like a weird like I would do one of these things that's not an actual attack and not an actual block. That would then result in a snowball effect. Um, so I think you could fully play the game perfectly fine with just the basic combos. The others are cool and fun if you can get the hang of them, but I definitely don't think that they're necessary. But the armed combat
I
felt really good.
I think that just in general, the actual combos are basically just reserved for like your basic enemy. When you get to a boss, a lot of the time they will guard most of the combos that you try to input, because they kind of want you to have that like back and forth between like enemy boss, enemy boss. The good thing though is that at least from what I can see, when you're fighting a boss and you're mid combo, you can just click the L button. It will cancel any action that you're doing in order for you to like start dodging or
Mhm.
parrying. So it can be pretty useful. Oh, I think it went out again.
No, you're there.
You're good right now.
Oh, that's so sick. It showed that it died for a sec. It can be pretty useful overall. To just like unlock or just like focus on really learning your defensive options over your offensive options, because like for most bosses you could pretty much get away with ducking down
Mhm.
or parrying. Those were the two things that
Yeah.
I thought worked the best. Occasionally, to ruin your day, an enemy will know a move that is a low sweep, and you'll see it coming, you'll know it's coming, and you won't dodge it. You'll fall on the floor, and then they'll axe kick you and you die. And that was the cycle for me in particular, because I'll be like, I'm so ready for this sweep. I'm so ready for this sweep. And then it did not happen when I wanted it to, and then I died. But for the most part, like focusing on offensive options, like it was like cool stuff in concept. Like I remember the first upgrade that I wanted to get was like I think it was like projectile master, where like anything you could see, like you could just like kick into people.
Mhm.
And I thought that that was a pretty like cool concept. But then like when I tried to use it against like normal enemies or bosses, since they guard, it felt like just kind of like a neat gimmick as opposed to an actual tool. one of the best skills you can get is like the command skill for, I think it is just like a low sweep as well, and it
Mhm.
basically mid combo, say you're getting like parry or whatever, or if you're getting hit, you can activate, if you're fast enough, you can activate that sweep and basically stop your enemy mid combo, and then you could follow it up with like with on the ground. That was the most useful skill entirely, just entirely, like, because it would do so much posture damage, and it would just do like so much damage to the boss that it was a lot easier. It was much better to get a skill like that than it was some of the other skills. And I think maybe that's the point, is that some stuff on that skill tree is really useful, but others is just for like style or flair. A lot of
Mhm.
like the combat in the game is based on like Wing Chun. So like some of your more stylish moves are paying like homage to like Ip Man, for example. So it's cool to like be able to use those attacks when you're playing the game, because now you're like feeling more like John Wick in the club, or you're feeling like it man in the dojos, like that's neat. But at the same time it feels like more stylistic than actually relevant in gameplay. And it's cool, but like I wish there was a better indicator or ID, like way to figure out like what you need the most. um
Mhm.
they did kind of give you like prices on things, so maybe that was like the idea to dissuade you to buy certain things over others. But I still like looking at that upgrade tree, didn't really have an idea of like what I wanted to get until like watching a tutorial and seeing people say like this is the thing that you want to get when you first start this game, because it'll make combat infinitely easier for the rest of it.
Yeah, I feel like if you're just taking the skill tree at face value, like most players are just going to assume that what's at the bottom is what should be prioritized, because for those that don't know, the way that this skill tree sets up is that basically more of it gets locked out as you age. So the things at the bottom are, I think, once you are 30, you can't access those anymore, and it just progresses more and more. So one would think like you need to get those first and then sort of work your way up the skill tree in a way. And the other thing that I think just wasn't communicated super well and was something that I just found like through research for the game was that if you do invest in a skill and you reset, it'll still remember progress that you had towards it. It's just that you won't have, that skill saved fully over. Like it was kind of confusing because it was making it seem like, oh, if you don't fully, commit to this, that's it. Like you're gonna have to start over. So it does become sort of a like, do you want to tunnel vision on a skill and just have it completely and have it carry over, or do you sort of want to slowly build into something, and sort of pick your battles with it and then get it eventually through a certain amount of runs?
Yeah, and I know Nick had mentioned previously that the fact that things get locked out once you reach a certain point, like once you
Yeah.
pass a point, feels a little strange, and I tend to agree with that. Because it makes sense for things to unlock as you get older because you're spending more time like in your craft, you're becoming a better martial artist. So it makes sense to have more options as you become more talented,
Hmm.
as opposed to like, oh, you're old now, you can't do that anymore,
Yeah.
but you're still like a hand-to-hand combat master, but now your staff breaks easier. Felt a little weird.
Yeah.
Um, in general, like my biggest gripe, the controls. I don't know if that's like a person by person situation, if that's a hardware situation. I don't know what that is. But my biggest complaint really was in the fact that the game leaves you high and dry on a lot of things and doesn't explain stuff.
Yeah.
Mind you, I'm someone who, when I play a game, I'm not necessarily like I look at the controls and I tend to ignore the tutorial because I like learning things, hands on. It's fun for me. That's one of the reasons why, to bump back to the difficulty thing real quick, I tend to start out playing on normal, and I will bump down to easy because what I look for in a game is I like to go over and, like especially in like Hi-Fi Rush, I was really really intense with this. Comb over every single piece of the environment for like environmental storytelling, little things to interact with, and that's how I like to play the game. So sometimes the game gets in the way of the game for me of like, stop attacking me. I want to read all of the writing on the wall. Stop talking to me. So that's kind of me. And like I will fuck around with controls to see what works. But if it's not working, then yeah, I want to be able to go into like the options menu, or I want to be able to look at like a rundown of the rules. When something has an optional tutorial that you can go into, or if it has like an optional encyclopedia in the game of explanations of how things work, not a mandatory tutorial that you're forced to go through. And if you're not someone who wants to do that, you can't skip. That's frustrating. I don't like that. But there should be somewhere in the game a place where you can find comprehensive information about the core mechanics of the game that just isn't there, and I do think that that is a very severe oversight.
Um, just a just a quick follow-up on some of the thoughts. I think that for maybe the skill tree too, maybe the way that upgrades should work is that some upgrades are based on like, lower levels. So maybe something that's more physically intensive. So like say like a god punch might be something where it's like, okay, he's younger, so like he'll have more time to like have like more force within like his punches and the way that he's fighting. And then maybe as he ages, since his more defensive, since he's frailer, maybe give us more options for like throws or passes, ways that you can act passively, and like quicker options. Maybe he has like quicker ways to deal with these people as opposed to, trying to like rough them out when he's younger. I think like just maybe having it like on both sides of the skill tree be an interesting thing. Um, to follow up to, the game does have a tutorial. Just for context, in case you viewer want to say bad things about Emily, but I think that the tutorial itself isn't the best. It kind of prioritizes you learning how to parry, and I think parrying is really important. But for like a first time player, I think you shouldn't even like worry about parrying. Really should learn how to like dodge and weave first, because they give you more frames to avoid damage as opposed to parrying, which is very tight and precise. And like, yes, it is good to learn at a certain point, especially for the final boss of the game, which we could touch on later. But early on, I think you really should prioritize like learning how to dodge and weave. For like the first boss, pretty much all you're doing is ducking down. Occasionally he might throw like a low sweep, but you're probably not going to see it. But for Sean, like you're going to be dodging down a lot, and for the third boss, like you pretty much need it because she introduces like omnidirectional dodging, which is hilarious because it never shows up again. So like for her, you have to dodge up down, and then like you have to dodge left and right for like her swing at the end. So like you have to memorize all of these different dodges in order to beat her. And it does feel rewarding. It does feel great because especially with like the second half of the boss where like things actually tone down and all you have to do is like catch a knife thrown at you and throw back.
Yeah.
For the first half of it, like entering that boss room for the first time, I like cried. I got comboed like immediately. I died
Yeah.
so many times, and like I pretty much had to watch a guide, and the guide was just like, dude, just get fucking good. And I'm like, ah man, shit, I guess I will. And
Yeah.
then like from there, like I had to just like practice dodging up and down. For me, I guess too, like I hate that you have to dodge in the opposite direction of a hit,
because I learned from Punch Out that you dodge into punches to get away from them. So when I had to play a game where I basically had to like swap the directional controls for my brain, a lot of the time I was just like eating damage for no reason. But yeah, it's cool that the third boss is there because like you do get good at it, and then like for the next two fights, it's like okay, whatever, I know how to do this now. I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But it just feels so bad because I feel like the pacing of it just gets like thrown in the middle because that's the point
Mhm.
where it's like, oh, I'm gonna play the club, I'm gonna get through the club, and I'm gonna feel frustrated, and then right after I'm gonna
Yeah.
fight the toughest boss in the game, and then the other
Yeah.
two bosses are nowhere near as hard
Mhm.
because so it's like I don't know. There's a lot of pacing issues with the game and like how it went about stuff like that like I like it's weird for me to completely love it. I have like mixed feelings overall. I do think though that like maybe like I mentioned before, maybe it's just like since we played it in a month, like it wasn't like the type of game that we should have done that for, and it might have been the type of game that like you spend a lot of time practicing. So like if you're playing like a fighting game, you're going to like practice combos, you're going to practice dodges and things like that. That's the way like I had to think about Sifu as opposed to playing it as like just any sort of like beat 'em up or generic game. And I think that is the correct way, but I think like you have to commit a lot of time to it. And even then, after you've like mastered the game is so short, it doesn't feel rewarding to actually learn all these things. That's kind of the way I felt.
Gotcha. Okay, so I have a few things on that point. Um, One, I almost feel like calling this is as a beat 'em up, and it does say that on a Wikipedia for the genre, but like, correct me if I'm wrong. For me, I feel like a beat 'em up is a game where I boot up and I can just oonga boonga my way through. I don't gotta
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
anything. Like the research that I did on this, the person made a note very early on in the video, basically like this is not a beat 'em up game. This is like a strategic. You have to be deliberate with your
Yeah.
commands. Like if you don't know what you're doing, like the game is going to punish you for that. So that number one. Number two, I feel like I agree with a lot of what you said regarding bosses. Because of just the way that the game approached tutorialization, it felt like, oh, this is just the same thing as like, fucking Claire Obscure. I could just parry things. I could parry things like I did in Hi-Fi Rush. Like, this is easy. And then I get to Sean. And if you try and parry Sean, I feel like that South Park meme, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. Dude, count just like the count of how many times you get like smacked in the face by the staff, roll over,
Yeah.
and then Sean punches you on the ground. Like,
Yeah, like that boss is literally designed to teach you, no, you cannot parry yourself out of this game. Like I think that is a choice in terms of making parry something that is to be really used sparingly, because as Nick said, it's like you really should just be using dodges for a majority of the game. And then the last one is like, okay, now Uno reverse card. Actually, you do need to parry this guy. This is like the
yeah,
one mofo that you gotta parry for the entire game. And then I would say after that, if you're playing other levels, like when I booted this up a couple days ago just to kind of refresh myself on stuff, I did notice that I was just sort of like parrying on impulse. So I do think if you spend enough time with it, you can kind of get that feel for it, but definitely not like as you're trying to learn, how to get through, and definitely not on Sean. No
yeah.
way.
I
Um there's one thing else I want to say, but it's trailing me right now. So someone go ahead and I'll try to think about it.
Okay, so the funny thing though, so I'll do the fun Sifu story because I could summarize it very quickly.
Yeah.
Yang, the leader of a rogue martial arts group, kills your master and threatens to kill you. That's right, you. And like the first boss, Fajar or Fahar, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm very sorry. He slits your throat and you die. But you got 5 gold doubloons, and they're able
I hate the way you put that.
they're like 5 coins essentially, but they're able to essentially transfer you back in time, and or like I guess forward in time. So like once you die, you continue living, you escape, and then you grow up to the age of 20, and you decide that you are going to take revenge on everybody for killing your master. Um Going into that though, I think I had a realization like halfway through the game, because talking about like Hong Kong cinema and like Korean cinema, if I was gonna mention something like Old Boy, the themes of Old Boy and like movies like that are always about like getting revenge and like the toll that it has on your physical body and well-being. And even when you do necessarily get revenge, it's not, it might not be something that you actually want. And with Sifu, that message is still carried over, because you can run through the whole game and kill every boss, and when you get to the end of the game, you don't feel accomplished or complete. There isn't any fanfare. So I realized that maybe I had to like spare the bosses. This is something I realized naturally because one of the you have like a pin board, and like as you interact with different objects that are important in the level, your character essentially puts those objects onto the board and like connects them all like with the like Pepe Sylvia style with like pins and walls. um but one of the things I noticed was that I had picked up like an envelope, and it basically said like Fahar had it was like medicine for Fahar, who has like an untreated disease, and Yang was the one giving it to him. Um, so I thought that was very interesting because it essentially like recontextualizes a lot. So it's like somebody who you thought was very cruel and evil at the beginning of the game. Why is he going out of his way to still support someone that he probably shouldn't be talking to at this point, or probably shouldn't care about? And then on top of that too, with all the bosses, getting to them, like there is a certain reluctance that each and every one of them has. Like the first boss, like he just kind of groans when he sees you, and then he like fights you. I think Sean is the only one who's like, oh, a challenger. The rest of them were like, I really don't want to fight. This is like, I don't care about this. Let's just let this go. And as you approach it, like you go and then you kill them. Needless to say, all of this is to say is that your first run through, you should just go and try to kill them, because you have to like learn their attacks. And I think that learning how to dodge them first is important because of that. But when you want to go around the second time and like spare them, you have to actually parry them a majority of the time. So
Hmm.
all of the moves that can connect are parryable. And once you learn that, and once you get the timing down, a lot of these bosses become pretty easy, which is eh, completely strange. It felt really weird. Um, and so like to spare them, you basically have to like break their stability meter the first time, not approach to kill them, and then the second time around, you have to like parry them enough times so that stability meter breaks again, and then you get an option on your D-pad to essentially spare them. And that is the way that like you kind of get the good ending of the game and like the secret final fight with Yang. Um so it's weird because like on one hand, the game teaches you very early on in like the tutorial that like how to parry, doesn't incentivize it for I guess like the first run through, because you probably should do dodges so that you just like learn the timings and what attacks patterns are coming. And then on the third playthrough, the third run of it, that's when you should like really learn how to parry everything, because that way like you can get the good ending or the true ending of the game. And tying all those themes together, it really is just like, instead of going and, you know, having that cycle of revenge that takes place in a lot of these movies, here it's a story essentially about forgiveness and letting go. And once like, you know, your main character is able to do that, he achieves Wu Dai, which is like, you know, like a I guess like like he climbs to a mountain and it's like the special thing. I still feel like the game ultimately doesn't have an amazing story,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that if there was more narrative, they could have driven that home better. And either way, still think you do get a climactic ending, but it is interesting that a piece of media like that about revenge actually tries to teach you the opposite lesson, because especially in American culture, I feel like we do tend to idolize like those revenge fantasy stories and like getting back and like killing and all those things. And in this game it's ultimately telling you maybe that's not the right thing. Maybe that isn't what you're supposed to be doing.
Maybe chill out, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like like I said, I hadn't finished the game, but I did do my research so that I can, just not just sit here and nod silently. So I did do some reading and watching to see, what things that I missed. And I do think that for something that starts out as a revenge story, it does kind of like it does give that opportunity of like, okay, yeah, we can go all in on the vengeance and all the consequences thereof. That kind of like, is it worth it? Or you can take the other route, which I do think is like the more interesting revenge story. Because yeah, a lot of um, a lot of vengeance storylines do end. What is it when you try to when you try to take revenge, dig two graves or something? That
Mm.
Yeah,
turn of
that
phrase.
phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that this is like an interesting opportunity where you can kind of veer left. And I know there's also the kind of idea in here about it was the Guardians were the people that had the talismans that didn't want them used, and then it was the other group, Yang's group, that wanted to use these like magical talismans
Mm-hmm.
to improve people's lives or to change things, ideally for the better.
Yeah.
So there's also that idea of like, should power be kind of like guarded and kept away and hidden, and like power is something to be not ashamed of but wary of, or should power be used ideally for good but there are consequences there? So I think there's also kind of that old guard new guard, how should we be using our power storyline going on there, which is interesting. I will say though, like all of that was not super evident where I had stopped. So by
Mm-hmm.
the time you reach the second boss, there's obviously, that your Sifu is killed. That's how the game opens. You know that there are these people that you're gonna have to kill, and you've got your little pegboard. So you do have some environmental storytelling, but most of it very much not early on. It is, I think, quite backloaded towards the second half of the game. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say so.
I think that's fair.
Because like I said, when you get that envelope, I think that that was the whole idea. Because you have to backtrack to get it anyways. You get like a key, and then on your pin board, it shows you where that key is within the first level. And like, there's a locked door when you play through the first time, so like you wouldn't know that. But then like the second time around, when you like go back to that level, you're able to open up the door and find that envelope, and it'll tell you that little message. And I think that that's kind of like the idea, is that I guess the first time around it is really about vengeance and like focused vengeance, like you hone in on it. And then the second time around it's like actually humanizing the characters a little bit more, to the point where you kind of see that like they're not as bad as you think. Like they did kill your master, but it's because maybe your master wasn't the best person. Maybe they should be using power in a different way. And it's like It's interesting, but I feel like it didn't do a great job of like with the story. It is very subtle, and I like that, but I don't know. I felt like it was such a short experience where like those concepts didn't develop as well as I would have them like them to have been. Like it just it felt very short, and because of that, it's just like that whole narrative about healing and peace kind of flops for me.
Yeah, I will say that the game, if you haven't picked up on any clues before it, once you go through it and you off Yang, the game does make it pretty obvious of like, okay, this is not, it's no bueno here. Like, your master is like disappointed in you. So I think most players at that moment will be like, okay, maybe there's something else I'm missing there. Whether they find that organically, like Nick said, or it's just that you're looking up things like me and I had already known at that point before I even got to the end that, I wasn't going to get the true ending until I spared everybody. Um, so yeah, that's the other thing too is like I feel the story was fine, and I agree with what you guys are bringing up in terms of it does bring up good themes and ideas. But it seemed more so as a vehicle for the gameplay to exist rather than for them to sort of coexist at the same time. And what you were saying, it got me thinking is like maybe if there was a little more to it after you have that realization of sparing beyond like that little cutscene that you get of like, oh, he reopened the academy and he has the beads and everything now. Still using the talisman. If there was a little bit more to it, a little more meat on the bones, then maybe that message of the healing and vengeance not being the right path would hit more. Because that's the thing is that for me, like it's just you need a time to pass. Like I feel the and that's a unique thing about games as a medium is that they have these very unique storytelling opportunities that other mediums can't really do because you're not only spending so much time with these characters or whatever story is presented by the developers, but you're also interacting with it. You're being a part of the experience. So that's why I feel like with games, I'm able to be much more emotionally invested if that is set up for me story wise. That's all I got on that point.
Yeah, I actually want to bounce off of something that you said because I think it's a really cool point in general, especially about games. And like something that I was thinking of here is you said that some of the story could be really just a vehicle for the gameplay. And there's a mode of thought in design in general, not just game design, but design, that I think actually originally comes from biology. I've heard it both in biology and in design classes, but that is that form follows function. Right? So the shape a thing takes is is supposed to serve the function that it performs, right? A shell is hard because it is meant to protect what is on the inside. Um, so I did wonder, like, how much of this game is just based around the idea that you are playing a combo combat focused game where you age when you die and things change based off of that. How much of that is a shell to facilitate this point versus like what was originally conceived? Was it we want to make a like Hong Kong like fighting movie style like Ip Man type movie video game? And okay, these are the coolest things that we can do to make this happen. Or what I think is more likely is they had the idea for I think the aging system probably first since that is
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
the core nugget, and they're like, okay, what do we build around this to make it the
Yeah.
coolest thing we can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
um so I do think that is probably, at least when I look at the game from a design perspective, that's how I definitely feel it was built from the inside out. which does kind of mean that while I think the story is interesting, I don't think it's particularly unique. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, the music slapped, the art style slapped. I thought for the most part the level design was well laid out. I do have
Yeah.
some gripes that I want to ask you guys about. Um, but in general, I think it was, controls aside, a well designed game, but maybe not a particularly innovative game outside of that core idea that everything else was built on top of.
I agree with that sentiment. I think that aesthetically that is kind of like the best part of this game is that like each of the levels layouts and the way that the game looks and honestly even the way that it feels feedback for the punches and like the combat itself is so good. Like there
Mm-hmm.
I like when you hit something how the controller like shakes and things like that. I love my controller rumble. If anyone says shit, I will punch you personally. But it feels good um aesthetically entirely like I think about like the first level that genuinely reminds me a lot of Ip Man. Second level reminds me a lot of John Wick. Third level we get like
Mm-hmm.
Lady Snowblood referenced and then so on and so on. And I think those are all cool. But I think like looking at those stages and then like thinking about the movies, like I guess too maybe that is just an issue with the genre in general because a lot of those like a lot of Hong Kong cinema and a lot of Korean cinema, not that it's a problem, but it's more like they're pretty light on story to really focus on like choreography and like the actual action set pieces that are like inside of those movies. Um Again, like I haven't watched all of them. I watched Old Boy, which is my favorite one. Again, another reference with the first level, but it's like hit or miss. Like sometimes you will get a lot of story. So for example, Old Boy is more like a detective movie essentially than
Mm.
it is like a traditional like action martial arts movie, and it kind of tricks you into that initially with that in like that fight that kind of happens because he does become this just insane badass at one point, but then the story like slows down. But then like, you know, John Wick for example, like I love John Wick. John Wick, they're like my favorite movies. I won't lie. But like you're not getting a lot of dialogue within John Wick. Like you have the basic concept of his character and like sometimes you might get a moment where like he kind of breaks that. I think like we watched like the ballerina movie kind of recently, and one of my friends is like Ana de Armas's character is basically asking like, "Oh, can I escape from this?" And he's like, "There's a front door." And like it goes into just them talking a little bit and it was like just nice. You get a little bit of world building, a little bit of character development for something that you don't get a lot of within the actual series. But yeah, I think that like maybe that's why Sifu could theoretically be light on story. Maybe it is also trying to pay like homage, homage, homage to that. Um
Homage.
homage.
Omelette du
But
fromage.
Oh,
I
Macron.
I think I do Macron.
Don't start. Don't start. Keep
I'm
going.
so sorry. I I do think that I like movies with just like I guess if we were gonna bring up one, Everything Everywhere All at Once is
Mm.
just kind of like that perfect balance for me. If we're talking about cinema, where like you get a lot about the character and you get this like really nice overarching story. And even that one, like if you go into it, like that one's about kind of starting out being angry at the world and thinking that you haven't like made the most at your life, and then like it turns into a story about like loving oneself and loving the world that surrounds you in a very similar way. I think that like Sifu kind of does that as well. But looking at that movie, I like that there's a lot of time spent between getting to like know these characters and getting to understand them first before their conflict comes into play, and then having that challenge itself
like not only be like an obstacle for them in the movie, but a way to further develop their character. Here, I felt like since the story was so light, like I really didn't care about the bosses as much as I want to. So like mowing through them didn't bother me as much. I would have loved
Yeah.
um not this necessarily this game turned into like, you know, like a 20-minute cutscene per like boss, but you know, I kind of wish that we learned more about their lives before they assassinated his master, and maybe like that way you have an idea of like, oh, maybe they weren't that bad, but this one action was just so unjust and evil. It makes me rethink my relationship with them, and then having that towards the end happen, like now, like it just like confirms or denies like your opinions essentially, and like seeing them now in the state that they're in and trying to be peaceful and resolve the conflict like verbally, like maybe that would have felt like a better resolution. But as it stands, since you don't really know the character, like you can't really make opinions about them, and you can't really justify whether or not they should live or die. And that's my big stance about that.
Yeah, I think on the one hand, it's like there is a case to be made where they could have taken a page out of like Hi-Fi Rush's book that we just played last month, where that had pretty much 2 levels per boss. So it felt like the first one was more of like, all right, let's get to know this person, characters, more time to flesh those things out. And then you still can pull the trigger on the boss fight thereafter. Um, on the other hand, oh God, what was I gonna say? I'm blanking now. Duh, 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 duh. Yeah, I'm gonna pass off.
Okay. Sorry, I'm laughing at myself, not at you, I promise.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
only wrote a funny thing.
we have a little chat so we don't interrupt each other, so we know the stack of who talks next. And anyway,
You got the press
um,
string system.
yeah, pretty much. Um, yeah, the bosses were an interesting thing. It really like again, I guess we're just kind of naturally going to compare it at least a little bit to Hi-Fi Rush because that was the first thing that we played for this. But I think each of those like levels did a really good job of building up tension towards who the boss is going to be because you get like little snippets of who they are. Um, but that builds up. You don't really meet them; you just kind of hear them or get a sense of them, and that's enough to give characterization. For this, you get a little bit of that, you find little things, but it's not, I think, to the same degree so much. You get a sense that there is, like, supposed to be a deeper character there, but
Mhm.
it's not even enough for us to infer. It's not, it's not a show don't tell situation, which, I am very much show do not tell. But it's not even that much. You just get the sense that you're missing something. There's something happening very off screen that's not for us to see. Um,
Yeah, so I remember now what I was gonna say. It was gonna be on the flip side of that. The game almost wants to have this deception of like, yeah, you can finish my story in 15 minutes if you're good enough. If you get skill checked at the door, too bad, brother. You're gonna be here for a little bit more, And from what I looked at, it's like people are around that 15-ish hour, benchmark for doing a full run. So once you do that, you could definitely get through the campaign in 15 minutes, probably less. But until then, until that first run, you're going to be there for around 15 hours, give or take.
Uh, just a quick thing, but I think too, like for Emily, for example, if you make the game like too difficult at the start, like on top of the fact that there isn't a lot driving the story forward, and then the difficulty is too hard, like
Yeah.
what's your incentive to really like push into it, you know?
I would just say that it definitely is one of those games that is just going to bounce off a lot of people. It almost bounced off of me. And I was the one that
Almost
was
bounced off
like,
on
let's
things.
play this game. I'm glad that I came around on it, but
Yeah.
I was really struggling with it to start. Like I said, the
Yeah.
club was the biggest check, and after that, I feel like there was nothing else that I was like, I'm not gonna continue with this. Like 3,
Yeah.
as Nick said before, that boss is still tricky. But at that point, I guess I was just like, I don't care. Like, if I could do the one before, I could do this. Like, it's frustrating, but I'll get it eventually.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys about, because I had thoughts about it. So there were like two kinds of mini bosses that would kind of happen throughout the game. There are the ones that are like very clearly mini bosses where like you show up in their room, they're in the middle of the room. Like I think about one of the ones that we see during the first level, where you walk into this room full of money and there's just this huge dude sitting on a throne, and he
So
gets up, he punches it, he's like, I'm gonna have to take you, like whatever the hell he says. Very
I'm
much
taking
mini
you to
boss.
Pound Town.
Yo.
But
He
here's
says
the
that
thing.
regardless of gender. He's so powerful for that.
Wow.
A
We
bisexual
love a
king.
progressive king.
Bisexual king.
Love bisexual king. But here's the thing. I took him out in 2 hits. Like he
Mhm.
died. He died immediately for me. But then the thing is, you go into like say the next room or whatever, and then you're fighting just a bunch of schmucks, and then all of a sudden one of these schmucks has like one of those like unbeatable level bars,
He
and now
aura
he's a mini
farms.
boss.
Mhm.
What was
He
that?
aura farmed.
Yeah, yeah. And now
Or-
now this dude is absolutely kicking my ass, and he was a nobody a minute ago. So I really felt like it was interesting that there were moments where like you could randomly have someone who is functionally a mini boss, but the
Yeah.
people who were very much set up as an actual mini boss, I think were the easiest enemies to take out at least. And maybe it was just because I was tense and I was like, oh man, I gotta get this right. Them I could always get down in like 3 hits, but then these random dudes who just went Super Saiyan absolutely threw me through a wall. I don't know if you guys had the same experience.
I I kind of did. So the reason why I think that happened was because since they get that like second health bar and they start getting like additional moves, most of the time you're fighting them in crowds, so like you're gonna be guarding a lot more. When you have the other mini bosses, the most you'll ever see is like a pair of them, and then the final level, the stairs, which is like every fucking mini boss, and it sucks ass, and I hated it because I just wanted to beat the final boss, get my salty run back, but here I have to beat up the entire Weenie Hut Club just to talk to him. But going into that a little bit more, I do think that like um the mini bosses weren't the hardest. The big guy was like definitely the easiest one. He looks the most intimidating, but most of the time you're just waiting for his like grab attack, and then like you can just kind of wail on him.
Mhm.
For me, the trickiest was like the I don't know, like I guess like the martial artist. Usually they would come in with like a staff or like and like the other one was like legs girl is what I would like refer to her as,
Yeah.
because she would just like throw a bunch of kicks at you.
Mhm.
um she's pretty easy once you get the hang of her, because you can like do your like you could do that like dodge combo, and then you can hit her, and then you can trip her, and then as soon as that's like it, you can punch her on the ground and it's done. Like that's a pretty easy one too. But I had like a really tough time with the martial artist ones, just because like very specifically they had that one punch that's timed a little weird.
Yeah, I
um
was gonna say that.
like they have like a follow-up punch that like is just timed like really late in their combo, and like you will probably just dodge it early and then get hit by it and it'll knock you down and then you'll die and it's awful. But overall, like I kind of think that I didn't have the toughest time, because with those guys in crowds, like the mini boss hop up, if you look really like hard, they will have something that's like really distinctive about them when they're in a group of enemies. So if you look for them, you could just kind of see like, oh, I shouldn't try to knock out kill this guy. I should just like kill him normally and let it go. That way I don't have to do the mini boss section, and that's how you can completely avoid it and never have to fight a Super Saiyan in the crowd.
Yeah, it definitely was hard to sort of grasp that at first, but basically it's like you don't have to use a finisher on
Yeah,
everything, and if you do, you may get punished in that regard. And I do also agree that specifically the two that are like right before Sean in the club, that was a bit of a struggle. Those two
that was
guys, and
rough.
yeah,
That was awful.
for the reason that Nick mentioned, like some of those punches, and I think they have some kicks too that they don't use too
Yeah.
often, but definitely was tricky timing, and there and to also what Nick was saying, not in that last level, but that same room in the club, there's stairs there. There was definitely a couple times where I was on the top level and one of them
Stick
pushed me. Yeah, and it was just like cuz like that's the other thing, like it makes sense from a realism standpoint, but like he takes so much posture and health damage, especially if you're
Yeah.
older. Like falling down the stairs, it really is John Wick. It's that one scene where he's
I've
just dun
fallen
dun
and
dun
I
dun dun
can't get
dun,
up.
you know, and you think it's over with, but no, you're still going, and you're probably gonna be
Yeah.
70 years old now. So good luck fighting the boss.
That last stage definitely was just like the John Wick stage where it's just like they know that you're gonna fight up the stairs and then get knocked all the way down and you're gonna have to come back up. They did
See,
that on purpose, and I know they did.
the weird thing is that like, I really didn't experience falling down the steps in that last level. It was in the earlier one where there's less stairs that I kept getting my ass handed to me and falling down those specific set of stairs.
Do you
Yeah.
know what was my like real ass kicker for some reason?
Mhm.
What?
In the first in the so the I think you keep referencing it as the old boy scene where it's like the
Oh
cross
yeah,
section of the hallway.
yeah.
Yeah.
For the life of me, I could not figure out what fucking direction I was moving in.
Yes.
I
Yes. Correct.
My
Yep.
controls like shifted on like a 45-degree axis, and I'm like, I'm trying to move forward and I'm going deeper into the wall. I am kicking left and I am kicking backwards. Where am I? I want to go home.
I
Uh,
I guess getting into that too, camera was an issue for me,
Yeah, I
and
was gonna
I thought
say
that
there's a couple whips
I
there,
thought that scene I
couple
thought that scene was cool, but when you have like omnidirectional attacks where you have to go back and forward to do sweeps or forward and back, kind of awful when they switch the camera angle and you don't know like which way your character is necessarily facing on a plane. So you're just inputting in weird ways and sometimes it doesn't register and then you get like dog piled and die. I felt like that happened a few times for me, where it was like the camera itself was like definitely testing my patience. For the most part, I was like pretty fine with it. They usually like, especially when there's groups of enemies in like a wider stage, they'll give you a lot of room to like they'll pan out the camera, you're kind of looking
Mhm.
at above and you're able to see like where each enemy is approaching you from. So there's never an instant where like an enemy will kind of be behind you, um and then like you have to worry about it. That only happens during bosses. That's we'll talk about that in a sec. um for the most part, like they give you enough space that you could see a lot of oncoming hits, and like you can prepare like counters or parries or dodges. But then like sometimes they'll do something a little bit more cinematic, and that's when I kind of struggle. I like the top down camera a lot because it gives you a good field of view for enemies that are approaching you. And some of the cinematic cameras, even the one in the hallway, it gives you an idea, like it's spaced out wide enough so you could see enemies approaching you from behind. But when it's faced upwards, it gives you a better idea of how you're supposed to input directions for combat versus when it like shifts to a cinematic perspective, because sometimes it can get a little bit jarring like how you're supposed to actually maneuver your stick, and it can really just be the point where you die randomly. Like that's what happened to me a couple times.
yeah, you know
Yeah.
the beach that makes you old? That was
Yeah.
very much the hallway that makes me old. That's how
um
I felt the whole time.
I was gonna say, jumping back to controls really quickly. So I think, for us, you're talking about doing half circles or quarter circles, you need to worry about
Yeah.
directions. For us, it was really just keystrokes and then a matter of left or right on the mouse. So we didn't have to worry about directional pushes as much. But for like the sweep, it was like, as I said earlier, kind of an awkward timing of needing to do that W and S and then the mouse trigger. So I do feel like while camera was definitely awkward for me too, it wasn't to the point of like I'm worried about, where it's going because I have a directional input because I didn't have any directional inputs needed.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that I had with camera, and Matt, I'm curious to see if you had a similar thing. So when I got backed against a wall, the camera that was trying to do the kind of top down better FOV situation, my camera would freak a little bit and it wasn't sure, I think, how to account for the wall or like a collision of even like a high countertop, like one of the countertops that you have to slide over. And I think it would sometimes freak a little bit and flip it so that I was facing myself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that was also very much, I get it, you don't want to get backed into a corner in one of these, but at the same time, if I'm against a countertop or something, I don't necessarily need to see what's behind me more than I need to see what I'm hitting at. I should be able to
Yeah.
see both, but I feel like forward was much more important, and I would have to manually, again with my mouse, like swing myself back around if
Yeah.
I got backed against something.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It definitely feels like there was times where the camera would be over adjusting. Like you would make a movement and it's like whoosh, and you're like, whoa, whoa, no, go back the other way. That's not you're too much, buddy.
Calm down, calm down.
Yeah.
Down boy.
For me, like it happened a lot during the bosses. Sean, it definitely happened to me where like I
Mm,
was backed into a corner by
yeah.
him. Because part of it too, like talking about corners, like to combo a lot of the enemies fully, hitting them against walls is really important because it bounces them and then you can continue and extend combos. This does apply to bosses too. So like for the first boss, you can keep slamming him into the wall or into those like little like tables with like plants on top of them. And with Sean, you can do it too. But Sean also has the ability that if you get too close to them, he can like grab you and I think switch your position. So if you're not paying attention, you could get pushed into a corner. And that's when I had issues because he would just like push me into a corner. My camera would get funky and I wouldn't be able to see. Um, I had a similar issue with Yang, but it didn't ever push me like again like that's part of the combat like he's pushing you into the corner to combo you, but I didn't have camera issues there. I specifically had them with Sean. It happened like twice to me.
Okay, cool. Does anyone have any other topics that they want to hit on that we feel like we haven't touched? If not, I think this is a good time to move into sort of a closing thoughts and wrap it up.
Really? No, I mean,
No.
we didn't really talk about visual and music, but I think we were all kind of in agreement that it was good.
Yeah, I feel
Um,
like we touched
Yeah,
on it. That definitely slaps. I don't think there's any question. Um,
yeah.
all right. I would
my camera
say
timed out for a second.
your camera's like,
Just did-
I'm out,
it's
bro.
just like I'm done, bro.
Good luck, Charlie.
Bye.
But I did want to say though, aesthetically it was like my favorite thing in the world because again, like I love these movies.
Mhm.
My friend Mark in particular, there is a point in time where he would just like keep showing me like Hong Kong cinema movies, a lot of like martial arts movies in general. And it was really cool like seeing them kind of put into a game. Like seeing like the first level reference like the Raid, Old Boy, Ip Man was incredible. I think like it's really great that a video game is like finally like representing like action movies and shows like a great love and an appreciation for them. And I again like we're talking about cell shading, always
Mm,
incredible,
yeah.
always beautiful. This game always like stylistically looks great.
highlights for me personally are like the club. Like even though I fucking hate that level, I think that club looks
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And like Emily said before, with like the music bumping so much, like it really drives you forward. Even if like I had some issues with the combat, I think like that helped like kind of drive my desire to play the game. And I think too, like with the third level being like that big reference to Lady Snowblood, I really loved like fighting in the snow too. You can even if you wanted to, like you could for viewers, Kill Bill also references Lady Snowblood. So if you've seen that scene in the movie, that comes from somewhere. So seeing it here was very cool, and it felt almost as if like kind of referencing both of them is interesting. Um, but yeah, everything aesthetically was really pleasing, and especially with the third level, I loved how that art museum kind of got surreal towards the second half, and like
Mm-hmm.
enemies were
Yeah.
popping up in weird places with statues.
Yes.
Fourth level was the only one I really didn't like. I thought that was like boring aesthetically, even with the idea that like you're still traveling through elevators underground. I just did not like it felt kind of drab in comparison to how cool the other levels looked for me. And even the last level, I think that even though it's not visually or like visually interesting, it plays a role more towards the story, that when you get to that level, instead of finding like a martial arts dojo, you find like a place of healing. Like it's essentially like a doctor's office,
Mhm.
where they like cook food, they host like yoga and tai chi classes, and they have like medical massages and treatments. And like even talking to some of the NPCs, they're like, oh, I hope I find healing here. Like even though it's not like visually super interesting, I think story wise it's very interesting, because you're kind of expecting like it's like with like Mario, right? Like you see the end of the game, you get that big Bowser castle that's like all fiery and crazy. Here it was just like, no, it's just like this kind of very simple, um what's the word for it?
I know what you're talking about, like, not
Yeah.
apothecary, but yeah, like a
Yeah.
place of healing and community.
Yeah,
Mhm.
essentially.
Word
Which I
for it.
which I appreciate. I yeah. I can't think of it, but it's just it was really cool. Like I think visually like everything worked out well for me.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, the CEO level is the least interesting aesthetically. That's what
Yeah.
I'll say on that. So
Even her boss wasn't interesting.
she like yoink.
Yeah, it's like yoink, and then
Yeah.
you're just like, "Oh, I've fallen," and then you get up, low sweeper, and just punch her into the ground, and you
Yeah.
just keep going. I felt bad actually. I was like, "Am I just like beating the fuck out of just an old lady?" Like,
Yeah, because she has
this
like the
doesn't feel
least
good.
amount of health out of all of them, which I think
Yeah,
is also what contributes to what you're saying about, oh man, this is freaking easy now, dude.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I can
Uh-oh.
do everything. I would say for like a TLDR on me, I think it can be a great game for you if you stick with it.
Yeah.
I would say at least try the club for a while. If it's really not your thing, it's understandable, but I would definitely go into it with at least expecting a little frustration there. I would say think of it less of a beat 'em up and more, as Nick mentioned, as more of a fighter typical kind of game where you have to be deliberate with your inputs. If you like roguelite elements, I think this is a big plus to you. It is not a huge amount of gameplay, but there is a bit for you there to customize each run if that's something that is super interesting to you.
Yeah, for me personally, so I personally would not recommend it. It is hard for me to because I couldn't finish the game. I got too angry to finish the game. But that being said, I am not upset that I tried it. I am glad that I tried it. I am happy for having had tried it. Um, I would recommend that you try it. However, I do recommend that you try it with the caveat of saying it was not for me. And in all honesty, it's probably not a game I would have picked up on my own, which is kind of the beauty of the fact that we're doing this. Playing games that we wouldn't necessarily gravitate to because we're three people, three different tastes. So I'm glad that I tried it. But it is very frustrating if you are someone who I think enjoys I don't want to say it's grindy, but it's a little grindy
Mhm.
in the sense of skill acquisition.
Yeah.
Not like, oh, I
Yeah.
need to collect 10 rat asses, but you know, you have to you have to
That's what you chose.
yeah, you
Oh
have
yes,
I know what
10
Emily
rat
grabs
asses,
in
20
World of
donkey
Warcraft
balls.
or Guild Wars 2.
my
Um,
Guild Wars 2. I'm just collecting
I'm
my rat asses to get
I
my
must collect
kudzu legendary bow.
yeah, totally get what you meant by the point though. That came through very clearly.
Yeah, yeah, it is grindy in the sense of like 10,000 hours to become good at a skill. This is
Mhm.
not how
yeah.
I want to spend my 10,000 hours. But music, visually, if you like these kinds of movies, shout out my friend Jacob, who I spent an
Yeah.
entire 4th of July with a couple years ago just watching the Ip Man movies, and they're so good.
So good.
If you like that kind of thing, try this game.
Yeah. Uh, Going into it, what I'd say is that if you definitely want to have a better experience, don't play on the hard difficulty your first go about. Definitely just don't do that. I think playing on like easy or normal is the best way to start this game. I'm gonna relate this, but it's gonna sound a little weird at first. My guitar teacher, when I like started playing guitar with him, one of the things that he noticed was that when I wanted to learn something, I tried to play it really fast to start, and then like I wouldn't really like learn the skills. So if I tried to play it again later, I wouldn't know how to do it because, I tried to rush learning it. With Sifu, I feel like it's the very same thing. Where like if you try to go into it and like rush your way through like combat, bosses, enemies, you're gonna have a really bad time. But if you take the time to like sit down and learn, also there's a fly there. Um he disappeared. I don't know where he went. But if you take the time to like actually sit down and learn the mechanics, you'll definitely have a good experience. I think like I said, this is one of those games where you probably want to start on easy mode just because even on normal, I feel like the bosses are a bit too difficult for me. And it might feel kind of baby at first because like the enemies are going to be cakewalk, but I think the bosses get to a point where like you're probably like upping your difficulty by one. So if you're playing on like easy, you're probably going to have like normal bosses. If you're playing on
Mm.
normal, you're going to have hard bosses, and then like if you're playing on hard, you're going to have a I don't know what the fuck this is kind of experience. But you know, I think that for me personally, I did enjoy this game a lot. I know that I've been very negative and critical about it, but I think that the game itself doesn't necessarily teach you the right way
Mhm.
um, from the start. And if it did, I think that you would have a more tailored and a better experience overall. Because for completing it. I think too the Sifu was just way too short for me to feel that way as well. Like when I got to the end and when I got to the Yang fight, which I do want to touch on briefly. I once I beat him, I didn't really feel that accomplished, and that kind of disappointed me. Um with the Yang fight too, talking about it, the reason why I didn't feel that way was just because with the Yang fight, it's essentially kind of interesting because since you were taught by the same person, Yang essentially has many of the same attacks and skills that you do. So when you're fighting him and you're parrying him, he's essentially mirroring the types of attacks that you use against you. And like if you know what they are, sometimes you can pick up on the attacks. So for example, one of the attacks is like this punch where he basically like drops his arm and then like if you try to swing at him, he'll smack you in the face. That's an attack you have too. So if you can see that, you kind of notice like, oh, I can like avoid that attack or avoid that damage by just like not approaching when he does that. And I think that's pretty cool for an overall boss. But for me, like since I spent a lot of time with the earlier stages, by the time I got to Yang, I was still like 25 or 26. And then my experience got curtailed because like after spending all that time learning and optimizing my runs to get to that point, the final boss, I basically was just throwing every single life I had at him. And it didn't take much skill because it was essentially like a war of attrition where like I just ran him down on lives and I would just, not really focus or learn him, and I would just like get to my last life and kill him. That's kind of like the way I felt about Sifu. And I didn't feel like I had this grand sense of accomplishment by the time I got there. And I think that maybe you can uh depending on how you do the levels and how well you do on the levels. But I feel like once you start to like master the mechanics, stuff like that becomes a little weird because instead of like learning him, I just kind of had this like wet fart of a fight because I just kept throwing like my lives at him. But yeah, it's weird because I do want to recommend this game, and I think there's a lot of positive attributes to it aesthetically, and even the combat overall I do like a lot. I like the ability to throw and to maneuver and outpace your opponents, but at the same time, like there's just like glaring frustrations that I have with it, like the skill tree kind of being useless, tutorialization not enough. I don't feel like a reason to be killing these people. And just overall there's just a lot of issues that build up for me where I would say that I kind of have a mixed recommendation of this game where I would say like again what Emily said, if you are really interested in these movies, you are definitely going to like this game a lot. But I would also caveat that with if you really like hard games or games where you like to spend a lot of time learning the mechanics, this game will definitely be for you. Um, for us, context wise, we had a very short time frame to learn all this stuff and to do all this stuff. So like I would recommend it like that. Like I'd recommend that you spend a lot more time like learning this game and maybe taking it on easier difficulties till you work your way up to like fighting these bosses, because it is not a game where you can just like put down um and like for a while and come back to it. It is a game that needs you to essentially provide your full focus and attention to mastering its skills.
Cool. Yeah, I think bottom line, it's a thing that you maybe need to do some of your own research and kind of understand who you are as a gamer, and hopefully that is enough information to sort of know where you land on the pendulum in terms of what we've talked about here today. So, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Save State Sessions. We are going to be playing Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion next time, courtesy of Emily's pick. So I'm very excited myself to get a little foray into that series. I've been told that there's multiple entries into it. So who knows? Maybe we'll be committing a lot of stuff with Turnip Boy in the future. But until next time, that's going to be it from
Tax
us.
fraud.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye bye.